I'll get your boss to fire you, she smirked, all teeth and perfume like a Macy's mannequin with a vendetta. I didn't even blink. Just smiled, tossed my badge lanyard over one shoulder, and said, "Good luck. He's my father. That was 4 weeks ago, but let me back up. 15 years ago, I was eating stale vending machine Pop Tarts at 3 a.m. with an engineer who hadn't showered in 3 days, while we tried to figure out why our servers kept melting down every time someone sneezed near the login page. We had 6 people, no budget, and a dream held together with Red Bull and delusion. Now, 300 employees, 3 floors of leased glass and steel downtown. I helped raise $120 million in funding, built the original pitch deck, drafted the first bylaws with a lawyer who thought convertible note meant car trouble. I found our first hire, our first customer, and our first fireable offense. Every piece of this company has a fingerprint of mine somewhere on it, and still, to half the people in the room, I'm just the founder's kid. Nepo baby, mascot, optics puppet. By the way, quick thing before I go full thermonuclear on this tale, if you're enjoying the ride so far, me a favor, tap that like button and subscribe. 90% of folks listen without it, but your click actually keeps this team caffeinated and chaotic in the best way possible. Seriously. Thanks. Anyway, enter Marla. Marla with her ocean-colored eyes, perfectly center-parted hair, and that effortless ability to say absolutely nothing in meetings while sounding like a thought leader. She was hired in after our Series B to professionalize operations, which apparently meant renaming all the Slack channels and doing photo ops with people she'd just laid off. Marla knew exactly how to work a room, how to perform competence like it was Broadway. She'd glide into board meetings with her color-coded Gantt charts and cherry-picked KPIs, somehow always skimming credit from whoever actually did the work. The board adored her. One of them even called her executive oxygen. She clawed her way up to VP of Ops so fast it gave the org chart whiplash. And once she got there, she made sure everyone knew who was in charge. That's when the games started. My title got changed from co-founder and strategic development to special projects liaison. Real cute. I got looped out of planning docs, left off company-wide updates, even uninvited to a client dinner I'd organized. I'd open a doc I'd written, only to find my name replaced in the comments section like a damn ghostwriter. Then came the kicker, a glossy internal presentation titled The Origin Story. Big timeline of milestones. Marla narrating like she was Ken Burns. Founding date, there. Early funding rounds, there. Names of the first 5 hires, mine was missing. I stared at that slide like it had slapped me. I don't cry at work, not in 15 years. But something about being erased from my own company's birth story hit like a punch to the ribs. When I brought it up, she blinked innocently and said, "Oh, that must have been a formatting error." Sure, like forgetting to include the inventor of the wheel in a PowerPoint about transportation. I gritted my teeth and let it go, or at least that's what I let them think. Truth was, I started keeping track. I mean really keeping track. Not just the emails and memos, but receipts, contracts, signatures, filing dates. I went into the dusty old Google Drive folders no one remembered, the ones labeled things like 2020 temp version final 1. I wasn't just looking for dirt, I was mapping a minefield. Because here's the thing about people like Marla, they rise fast, but they don't always read the fine print on the way up. And if you know where the tripwire is, you don't have to raise your voice, you just have to wait. The demotion came in an email, not a meeting, not a phone call. Just a cheery little calendar invite labeled Team Realignment. Q3 changes, followed by a 6-sentence memo that used the phrase structural optics like it was a shampoo brand. According to the new CEO, some ex-VC golden retriever named Tate who wore all birds to board meetings and used circle back like it was punctuation. It was being repurposed under Marla's vertical to streamline core functions. Translation, I now reported to the woman who once accidentally CC'd me on an email calling me redundant legacy fat. I sat at my desk for a solid 5 minutes just staring at that memo. Not reading, just letting the words hum in my brain like tinnitus. I could hear my pulse in my teeth. The founder's daughter. The woman who built the original investor model from scratch, who negotiated the first partnership with only a LinkedIn account and a Gmail address. Now bumped beneath a woman whose biggest win last quarter was making a Notion dashboard that looked like a mood board for Etsy. It wasn't just insulting, it was strategic. Marla didn't want to fire me. She wanted to erase me quietly, methodically, so no one would notice until I was gone and the room still smelled like her perfume. It started small. Meetings I was mysteriously left off of. Threads where I was looped in only after decisions had been made. Junior analysts who suddenly stopped updating me, citing new workflows that conveniently routed everything through Marla's chief of staff, a 24-year-old whose only qualifications were a TikTok following and an MBA with the ink still drying. Then came the metrics deck. Every month we had an internal all-hands, where each department presented wins, learnings, and roadmap shifts. I used to build half of that deck. This time I wasn't even sent a copy. When I finally saw it, forwarded by accident from a junior comms intern, it felt like biting into something sweet and tasting blood. Slide 6, Foundational Contributors. a timeline of company growth milestones. 2014, initial launch team of 6 engineers, 1 operator. No names. 2015, first customer signed ops lead strategy. No mention of my 23 redlined versions of that contract. 2016, series of close strategic oversight by executive team. I was the strategic oversight. I sat there with my hand over my mouth like I'd just witnessed a car crash in slow motion. Not because it was new, but because it was deliberate, polished, approved, distributed. They weren't forgetting me. They were rewriting history while I was still breathing. When I confronted Marla, she put a hand on my shoulder like we were sorority sisters and said, "You know how marketing is. They're optimizing for narrative cohesion. Nothing personal, narrative cohesion." I had 2 options, rage or precision, so I smiled, I nodded, and I started digging. Because I remembered something, a line, a clause, a signature, years ago. Marla had countersigned something, series of documents, when she was still incoming talent. She was so eager to prove she could swim in the deep end, she signed every page without reading past the header. And if I remembered right, there was a clause in there that would crack her entire house of mirrors wide open. I didn't know exactly where it was, not yet, but I knew it existed. And now I had a reason to find it. It happened in the hallway outside Conference B, right between the copy room and the fridge that hadn't worked since the Series C round. I was carrying a draft of the vendor policy, headed to meet legal, when Marla stepped directly into my path like a cat that had scented blood. She didn't smile, not this time. "I'd rethink your tone in meetings," she said, low and syrupy. "You're walking a fine line." I blinked, a line, her arms folded. Manicured fingers tapping elbows. "You keep showing up uninvited to strategy sinks, pushing outdated frameworks, undermining chain of command. This is a professional environment. I can get your boss to fire you." I didn't even flinch. "Good luck," I said, brushing past her. "He's my father," she scoffed, laughed a little too loud, like I'd told her I was Beyoncé's cousin. Sure, she called after me. Nepotism isn't a get out of obsolescence card. I didn't turn around, didn't need to. Let her laugh, let her think I was bluffing. She had no idea what she'd just done. Because here's what Marla didn't know: my father didn't talk much. He wasn't the kind of founder who cut ribbons or gave keynote speeches. He believed in building quietly, betting on people who earned his trust. When I told him I wanted to co-found this thing with him, he made me pitch it like a stranger. He made me earn my equity, investing tranches with performance gates. And I did, everyone. And now? He might have handed Dare Day to Tate and the board, but he still held majority vote, still read every clause, still trusted me to know which knives were ceremonial and which were real. So I went back to my desk, shut the door, and opened the archives. Not the sanitized public folders or the polished investor decks. I went into the graveyard, our original Google Drive chaos, the pre-series a mess of half-signed PDFs and Word docs with names like "do not use this version, may be final." I started reading every damn page. At first, it was just pain. Looking at those old docs felt like digging up bones, notes from 3 a.m. calls, janky logo concepts, clauses written by people who'd already flamed out or moved on. But then, deep in a dusty subfolder from 2016, I found it. A signed counterschedule to our series, a grant. Titled, Ops Oversight Addendum Temporary Signatory Assignment. Marla's name, her signature. Sloppy, rushed, scanned at an angle. Kind of signature you give when you think it's just onboarding paperwork. Clause 4.3. In the event that the assigned party assumes strategic oversight without written authorization from a board vote, the attached equity bonuses may be voided. Clause 5.1. Should the assigned party misrepresent contributions in company financials or official communications, this agreement is subject to fiduciary clawback upon review. I read it again, and I sat back, heart pounding like I'd found a live wire under the floorboards. She had signed this as incoming ops support before she even had her VP title. And she had no idea it existed, because people like Marla, they don't build, they present. They assume the paperwork is someone else's job. They forget that the foundation has names chiseled into it. I spent the next 6 hours in that archive, not just looking for dirt, looking for pattern, for rhythm. I started assembling a document map like a legal playlist, every timestamp, every counterparty, every attachment chain. By midnight, I had a binder, literally. I went full psycho and printed it, highlighted it, flagged it with tabs. I didn't know exactly when I'd use it, but I knew this much. The next time Marla came for my job, she'd be stepping into a minefield, and I'd already memorized the path out. The thing about legal landmines is they don't beep. They just sit there, dormant, patient, waiting for the right idiot in heels to step down with just enough arrogance to light the whole place up. Marla had no idea she'd already stepped. It was buried in a packet from April 2016, one of those standard issue onboarding bundles we cobbled together in the early days before we had real HR. The series oversight addendum. She signed it during her first week, back when she was a glorified project manager with a LinkedIn banner that said passion, people, performance. Probably thought it was just a formality. But there it was, plain as day, right between her W4 and a bad headshot. Clause 4.3, any strategic oversight conducted without written board approval shall void all bonus equity outlined in Schedule B. And then the crown jewel. Clause 5.1, in the event of misrepresented contribution or inaccurate attribution within financial reporting, signatory shall be subject to retroactive review and fiduciary clawback. I stared at those two clauses like they were gospel. I knew what she'd been doing. Publicly, she was streamlining verticals and building operational maturity. Internally, she was strip mining other departments for credit and building a resume out of recycled buzzwords. Half the growth metrics in last quarter's board deck were built on work she didn't touch, and the rest were doctored to make minor efficiency tweaks look like paradigm shifts. She was performing oversight. She was misrepresenting contributions. And worst of all, there was no board approval. No vote. No waiver. She'd signed herself into a trap. And I had the original document, time-stamped, filed, and never superseded. I should have felt elated or smug. But what I felt was colder, like metal settling into the bones. No rage, no adrenaline, just calculation, like a sniper aligning crosshairs from 2 miles out. For the first time in weeks, I slept. The next morning, I started quietly building my war chest. I didn't just print the agreement, I matched it against later documents, paired signature dates, verified board minutes, cross-checked every bonus payment that hit her ledger with HR logs and calendar entries. Anything that looked off, I flagged, because Clause 4.3 wasn't just a rule, it was a loaded weapon. And Clause 5.1, that was the safety catch. You don't pull the trigger until the conditions are locked in. I even checked the timestamp on her strategy presentation to the board, May 22nd. No board motion, no vote in the minutes. Just a discussion of operational consolidation, led by Marla, complete with a slide titled, Strategic Command, My Vision Forward, her words, on record, delivered in front of 3 voting members. I almost laughed. Next, I did what she never expected, I met with finance. Casually. Hey, I'm just reconciling some old equity schedules for legal. Mind pulling up the retro comp doc from Marla's hire. Took them 10 minutes to find it. That's when the second time bomb dropped. Turns out her bonus wasn't even properly registered in the updated equity ledger. They'd penciled it in during onboarding but forgot to finalize it during the Series B audit. HR thought legal did it. Legal thought HR did it. Classic startup whack-a-mole, which meant the equity she'd been crowing about for months technically didn't exist. I left finance's office with a smile I couldn't hide. Marla was walking around the office like she'd already taken the crown, not knowing the throne she sat on was made of spiderwebs and wishful thinking. I didn't tell anyone, not even my dad, not yet. I wanted it airtight, timed, surgical, because when this went down, it wouldn't be an argument. It'd be a dissection. It came wrapped in corporate wrapping paper, a Slack message from Marla's chief of staff that said, Hi Dorothy, just a heads up, we're scheduling a special board session next Friday to review org structure. Nothing urgent, just optimizing some flows and clarifying vertical ownership. Hope you can make it. Smiling face with smiling eyes, smiley face. Like she was inviting me to brunch and not my own execution. 2 hours later, the invite hit my calendar. Subject, Q4 Structural Realignment Executive Session, location, Boardroom 6A. Host, Marla Griffin, VP of Ops, attendees, board, CEO, legal, Marla, me. No agenda, no materials. Just a date and time and the scent of gasoline trailing behind it. I didn't reply. I just clicked yes, because I already knew what this was. This wasn't just a restructure, it was a purge. And I was the last box on her kill list. She'd already sidelined the old head of product, absorbed comms into ops, and realigned 3 department heads so fast the chairs were still warm. Now it was me, the last inconvenient remnant of the founder era. But she'd made one mistake. She thought I'd fight her the same way she fights everyone else, with politics and posturing. She didn't realize I was playing a different game entirely. That night I didn't cry, didn't call anyone, didn't rage type an email to HR or draft a manifesto in Google Docs. I made 2 moves. Quiet, clean. First, I opened the series of folder, found the countersigned addendum with Marla's signature on it, the one with clause 4.3 and 5.1. I saved it as a PDF, labeled it Series of Ops Risk MGPDF, and forwarded it to legal with a subject line that simply read, for review ahead of Friday's session. No explanation. No drama. Then I pulled up another thread, the one with my father from years ago, and we agreed that I'd never ask for special treatment but could always reach out if the mission was at risk. I forwarded the same document. No text, no warning. He replied 4 minutes later. Understood, that was it. Not are you okay? Not I'll handle it. Just that one word. And from him, it was louder than any boardroom tantrum. Because what Marla didn't know, couldn't have known, is that he didn't hand over this company lightly. He might have stepped back from ops, but he still read every quarterly report like it was a war briefing. He still called me after major client wins, and he definitely still voted. And when it came to internal ethics violations, his tolerance was lower than a snake's belly in a wheel rut. I spent the rest of the week letting Marla believe she'd won. She strolled around the office with her reorg printouts, whispering to department heads about streamlined authority and legacy dead weight. I let her believe I didn't know. Let her believe I was scared. Let her smirk in my direction like she'd already booked the celebration dinner. Meanwhile, I updated nothing. I didn't call allies, didn't warn HR, didn't leak anything to finance, because this wasn't about building a coalition. This was about lining up every piece of her ambition on a single, neat timeline, then showing the board the one clause she'd never read, and watching the whole thing collapse. Quietly, perfectly, by Thursday night, my binder was in my bag. Color-coded, indexed, flagged. I wore navy slacks and a button-down Friday morning. No jewelry, no statement necklace. Just clean, neutral, forgettable. Let her perform, let her sparkle. I didn't need to shine, I just needed to show up. It was like watching a peacock rehearse for a TED talk no one asked for. The night before the board meeting, Marla strutted through the office with a leather folio tucked under her arm like it contained the nuclear codes. She made a point of being visible, hitting every open desk, pretending to casually loop in department heads with little confidence nuggets like, "We're ushering in a new chapter, and once this bottleneck's resolved, the exec layer will finally be optimized." I was the bottleneck. She was the usher. She even brought out the heels, the red ones, the ones she only wore when she was ready to metaphorically kick someone's teeth in while smiling about collaborative synergy. I didn't flinch. I nodded when she passed me in the hallway. Let her think I was docile. Let her imagine I was Googling how to write a farewell email instead of cross-referencing a hidden clause in a legally binding agreement that had her name watermarked across the top. At 7:12 p.m., most of the office had cleared out and Marla was still parading around. I printed my final copy of the series at Oversight Addendum. I printed it 3 times, one for legal, one for my father, and one for the board binder. Each had the same 2 sections highlighted in neon yellow. Clause 4.3, strategic oversight conducted without board authorization, shall void all equity bonuses retroactive to the first instance of violation. Clause 5.1, misrepresentation in internal or public reports, shall be treated as fiduciary breach, subject to internal review and legal consequence. I didn't just highlight them, I attached post-its with specific dates and references to board decks where Marla had stood up, claimed strategic ownership, and referred to initiatives as my department's pivot. I included timestamps, source decks, and screenshots of her email summaries, already a kill shot. But then something else caught my eye. While scanning through the original compensation paperwork in the folder labeled MG Exec Onboarding Temp, I noticed something off. Her retroactive bonus structure, based on Series B performance indicators, had been drafted but never finalized. The signature page from HR was blank. The ledger update, missing. The board approval, only pending in the minutes. No follow-through, no legal processing. Short, the equity Marla had been crowing about, the shares she'd referenced on LinkedIn, the options she'd bragged about at last month's happy hour, technically didn't exist. The clause made her bonuses voidable if she broke the rules. But this made them phantoms, paper dragons, illusions. She'd been leveraging clout she didn't actually have. If this went the way I thought it would, she wasn't just going to lose her bonuses. She was going to owe them back. I printed those too, labeled and dated. Then I did the one thing Marla would never think to do. I ran a timestamp audit on the metadata of the original onboarding files. The compensation agreement had been created by her assistant, but it had never been pushed through legal, and legal never forgets. It was cold in the office by then. The kind of cold where even the printer sounds louder than it should, and the fluorescent lights flicker like they're unsure if they want to keep helping you. I sat at my desk, staring at the stack of documents in front of me, fingers drumming slowly. It was done. No speeches, no threats, no gossip, just one meeting left, one conversation, and one signature that was about to feel very, very heavy. The emergency board meeting began like they always do. Overpriced coffee, tension disguised as small talk, and Marla dressed like a victory parade. Hair straight, lips matte, blazer buttoned. She came in early and took the center chair, nodding graciously to each board member like she was hosting a talk show called Cleaning Up the Past. The room was stacked: CEO Tate, our general counsel, 3 voting board members, 2 from our Series B investors, and me, sitting near the far end just outside the circle. Like a witness or a ghost, Marla kicked things off with a slide that read, "Strategic restructuring for scalable alignment translation. Time to take out the trash." Namely me. "Thank you all for making time today," she began, voice velveted with practiced warmth. "We've been operating with legacy inefficiencies for too long. Our structure, while born from admirable beginnings, now hampers velocity. To meet Q4 targets, we must reconfigure outdated verticals that no longer serve our operational goals." She clicked to the next slide. A flowchart, colorful, confident. My name was gone. Just a slim new box titled Special Advisory Role, Legacy No Direct Reports, floating off to the side like a misplaced sticky note. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I'd already buried the bomb under her feet. Marla continued, riding high. Her speech danced between buzzwords like momentum inflection and founder halo syndrome. She never said my name, just referred to roles created under previous frameworks and resistance to modernized execution. I sipped my coffee, let her hang the rope herself. And then, right as she clicked to her proposal, full demotion, zero authority, legal cleared his throat. Apologies, Marla, he said, calm but pointed. Before we move further, there's a document that requires clarification. She blinked. Oh, he opened a slim blue folder, pulled out 2 pages, an addendum to the series equity grant, he said. Filed in April 2016. Signed by you, the room stilled, he stood. Walked to the center of the table, laid the paper in front of her and slid it forward. Is this your signature? Marla glanced at it like it was a parking ticket, then she froze. Her face didn't drop all at once, it cracked. First at the mouth, then the eyes. Her posture stiffened. One hand went to her pen, gripped it like it might help her balance. Yes, she said, barely above a whisper. The room stayed quiet. No one moved. Legal continued, voice still calm. We'd like to clarify your understanding of Clause 4.3, the one pertaining to strategic oversight without board approval, and Clause 5.1 regarding misrepresentation of contribution in official reports. Marla tried to speak, failed. She reached for the glass of water in front of her and missed it by an inch. My father, who had been silent the entire meeting, finally looked up. He didn't speak, didn't smile, just nodded once slowly. Tate, the CEO, shifted in his seat like he'd just realized he was sitting on a porcupine. Marla's allies on the board, stone-faced. One of them started flipping through the printed materials in front of him, as if trying to prove he'd read it all in advance. I was told that document was superseded, Marla said, voice dry. Legal didn't even blink. It was not. I said nothing. I didn't need to because the trap had sprung, not with screaming or chaos, but with the quiet weight of paper and memory, and all I had to do now was watch it unfold. Legal's tone didn't change. That's what made it worse for her. He didn't raise his voice, didn't scold. He simply spoke the way a surgeon might narrate an operation, precise, clean, and utterly without emotion. Clause 4.3 is explicit, he said, tapping the highlighted line with his pen. Strategic oversight without formal board approval voids any pending or retroactive equity bonuses. Given Marla's presentation of herself as the operational lead, both internally and in public filings, this applies retroactively to all bonuses outlined in her unsigned compensation schedule. Marla blinked rapidly. Her face had drained to the color of printer paper. The leather folio she brought in sat untouched in front of her, still closed like a coffin that hadn't yet been nailed shut. Legal continued, flipping to the next page. Clause 5.1 further mandates fiduciary consequences for any misrepresentation of contribution within internal or external reports. The Q2 investor update attributed 5 project milestones to Marla's department, 3 of which originated under separate verticals, with metadata and attribution documentation confirming original ownership elsewhere. He paused. We are opening an internal ethics review effective immediately. The room was dead quiet. The CEO shifted, visibly sweating. One of the investors leaned back so hard his chair creaked like it wanted to leave the meeting, too. And Marla, she didn't speak, she didn't argue. She just stared at the document in front of her like it had grown teeth and was preparing to bite. It was over. Everyone knew it. Her bravado, the curated power outfits, the handshakes that lasted too long, the meetings she scheduled just to circle back. None of it mattered now. Not in the face of a clause she never read, on a document she never understood, in a company she never built. She had tried to play executive, but she'd signed her name on a contract written in a language she never bothered to learn. And now the bill had come due. My father, still silent until that moment, looked around the room once. Calm, steady. The kind of gaze that makes men squirm and lawyers remember their place. Then he turned to me. Dorothy, he said, voice low but carrying, would you consider stepping in as interim COO until this is resolved? It landed like a thunderclap under the table. I looked at him, looked at the board, then back at Marla, still gripping the edge of the table like it might save her. And I nodded, of course. I didn't raise my voice, didn't smile, because this wasn't a celebration. This was a correction. It didn't feel like victory, it felt like gravity, like something heavy returning to where it belonged. Marla opened her mouth, maybe to protest, maybe to plead, but before she could make a sound, legal added one final note. HR is waiting outside with a copy of the audit scope. We'll need your credentials and access tokens by end of day. No one said thank you, no one clapped. That's the thing about justice when it's clean. It doesn't roar, it doesn't scream, it just lands. Marla opened her mouth, probably to perform one last desperate pirouette of corporate victimhood. There's been a misunderstanding, or I was misinformed, or that favorite classic. This isn't how we do things in ops. But she didn't get the chance. Because the boardroom door opened quietly and in walked Alicia from HR. Clipboard in hand, no smile, no eye contact, just business. She didn't say a word to Marla. She simply walked over to the security console in the corner, tapped her, and entered a short sequence. One beep. Then Alicia turned and gave legal a small nod. Marla's badge deactivated. Her lifeline, access to the building, email, Slack, project dashboards, expense systems, shut off in one click. She sat back down. Her jaw clenched so hard it looked like her molars might crack. The board didn't acknowledge her. Tate, our all-birds-wearing CEO, looked like he was trying to disappear into his recycled plastic seat cushion. The final slide of Marla's presentation still glowed on the wall behind her, realigning for smarter tomorrow. I stood, not with swagger, not with fanfare, just quiet, deliberate movement, like the tide pulling back after the flood. One of the board members asked, "Dorothy, would you like to formalize the interim title for the transition period?" I shook my head. "No," I said evenly. "I'd prefer to remain in oversight. Operational authority should go through legal until the review's complete." My father nodded once. Proud but not performative, just right. I closed my folder, slid the series of document back into my bag. The room stayed hushed as I walked out. No applause, no high fives, just the stunned silence that happens when everyone realizes the person they underestimated had been holding the blueprint all along. In the hallway, I heard the boardroom door open behind me. Footsteps, Marla. She gathered her things, what little she had left to gather, and followed me out, maybe to plead, maybe to hiss something venomous, maybe just to claw back one final scrap of dignity. But before she could speak, I turned to her, stopped, looked her dead in the eyes, and said softly, clearly, "Next time, read what you sign." Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Her eyes, wide and red-ringed, flicked toward the boardroom door, then back to me. She wasn't furious. She was hollow, because now she knew she hadn't lost to nepotism or politics or favoritism. She'd lost to documentation, to discipline, to a woman she thought was ornamental, but I wasn't the founder's daughter in the shadows anymore. I was the one who remembered everything. She turned away first, didn't say a word, just walked off, heels tapping out the final punctuation on her own rewritten story. As I stood in that hallway, the tension I'd carried for months, maybe years, began to lift molecule by molecule, not all at once, but enough to breathe, not because I shouted louder, but because I listened longer and waited for the paper to speak. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit 'em.